I want to play again for you the voices of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden during the campaign and what they were saying about a vaccine if it was released, before January of last year.
So let's just say there's a vaccine that is approved and even distributed before the election. Would you get it?
Well, I think that's going to be an issue for all of us.
If and when the vaccine comes. And it's not likely to go through all the tests that needs to be and the trials that are needed to be done.
When we finally do, God willing, get a vaccine, who's going to take the shot? Who's going to take the shot? You can be the first one to say, sign me up. They now say it's okay.
And the question of whether it's real when it's there, that requires enormous transparency. You got to make all of it available to other experts across the nation so they can look and see. So there's consensus, this is a safe vaccine. If the president announced tomorrow we have a vaccine, would you take it? Only if it was completely transparent, that other experts in the country could look at it. Only if we knew all of what went into it. If Donald Trump can't give answers and the administration can't give answers to these three questions, the American people should not have confidence.
But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
That is
incredible.
Incredible. Now, why would they say that? Did they believe it? No, they didn't believe it. They wanted to hedge in case it came out. They could create a division. We should all be cheering for something that is going to help the American people. But if you noticed, that doesn't happen. So when they say that they are going to crack down on people with misinformation about the coronavirus medication, the vaccine, shouldn't we start with what they said? Shouldn't we start with them? Shouldn't we be questioning how they have any credibility on take this vaccine when they themselves planted the seeds of doubt?
And they had the most significant action that has stopped people from getting vaccinated from the beginning.
Give this stat because people don't know this, and it's phenomenal.
The absolute peak of vaccine distribution in this country on average was 3.384 million doses. That occurred on April 13th of this year. Also occurring on April 13th of this year was the government pausing the Johnson & Johnson vaccine on the exact day of the exact peak. And since then, not only, they totally destroyed the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and the usage there with that pause, which is somewhat to be expected, but also the same thing, people became overall more hesitant from vaccines. And they tried to push these polls out there immediately afterwards that said, oh, well, people actually think it's a good thing if you pause a vaccine. They think they must be really on top of it. Well, the actions are totally disproving that nonsense the government was pushing out at the time. They paused that vaccine for 10 days. By the way, the result, we should point out at the end of it, was nothing.
Nothing.
Not even a warning.
Nothing.
The side effect was so rare they didn't even put a full warning on the vaccine. But all of that came with a result of now all three vaccines that have been approved for use here in the United States have declined ever since. And now we're at about 521,000 doses a day. That day, that decision by not me, not RFK Jr., not Fox News, but the U.S. government, that is the thing that has changed the tide here. Eventually, demand would have run out anyway, obviously naturally. But when you're at 3 and 4 million doses a day, a few more weeks of that puts their own administration way past their goals. All of those things that they're complaining about now, you wouldn't need to worry about people who are, listening to too much of RFK Jr. on Facebook. You wouldn't need to do any of that if you had just not blown that single decision, which they did.
I say to my brothers and sisters in Africa, if they come up with a vaccine, be careful. Be careful. Don't let them vaccinate you with their history of treachery through vaccines, through medication. Don't take their medications. We need to call a meeting of our skilled virologists, our epidemiologists, our students of biology and chemistry. We need to give ourselves something better. There are 14 therapies that we can treat COVID with. The virus is a pestilence from heaven, and the only way to stop it is going to heaven. Well, what kind of Christian fanatic said that? That was Louis Farrakhan. Has Louis Farrakhan been banned? How many things does Louis Farrakhan have to say before the government says this guy is a dangerous source of misinformation? Now, I don't want him banned. I want him to speak freely. I want to know what Louis Farrakhan is saying. But they don't seem to have a problem. In fact, many of the Democrats line up to take their pictures with Louis Farrakhan. And yet, people like me are deemed dangerous because I say you should decide. Now, it's of course just happening here in America because of the evil constitutionalists. Pay no attention to the 100,000 people that protested in France last Saturday. Now, why are they protesting? They're protesting the latest measure by the Macron administration to push people to get vaccinated to curb the infections by the Delta variant. Who are they pushing? They are saying that Macron needs to clear off we are losing freedom because their health care administrators and their health care, the nurses and the doctors, there are those who don't want to be vaccinated on the front lines. And 100,000 people took to the streets, left and right, coming together in two separate marches. Interesting. The left march and the right march, separate times, separate streets, on the same day, Saturday, protesting the same thing, but they couldn't get together. They couldn't stand together. Is that the Daily Wire that is doing that over in France? This is happening globally. Globally, we are questioning everything that our government is doing. We're looking and we're saying, what's causing all of these problems? Could we have gotten further had we not been arguing for political purposes about when did this really happen? Where did this really come from? Was China involved? You're not going to get anybody in corporate America or corporate globally to throw China under the bus because they all are in bed with China. They need China. China's the future, you know. Nobody's actually looking for answers. What's causing the riots on the streets? Do you know the murder rate in some of our biggest cities in America is up 30%? The murder rate is up 30%. Why is that happening? Well, if you listen to the Democrats now, it's because the Republicans wanted to defund the police. What? What? Where? How is that even? Where? Who believes that? You say the bold lie enough times and people believe it. And the bolder the lie, the more easy it is to get people to believe it because people think no one would lie about that. I mean, that's too easy to prove. It's called the big lie. And it was a principle of Hitler. The press, without any pushback, is calling what Donald Trump said about the election the big lie. The big lie, by the way, was how we can kill all the Jews. And there's no pushback. There's no problem with using that terminology where he is saying that Donald Trump was going to overthrow the government, and that's why people were there. They weren't there to overthrow the government. And if you really cared, you'd be talking to me about Antifa. If you had any credibility, you would have not told me to deny the reality that I saw with my own eyes all across the country all summer long, where people were actually saying, defund the police, all police are murderers, and this is systematic racism, and America needs to be overthrown. That was a revolution that they were trying to start. The big lie? Everything that is happening, all problems that are happening in the United States and in the world right now, is because the answers that we are given don't make sense. CRT. Well, that's not even being taught in school. At the same time, the same people who said that say they are doubling down on CRT to make sure that it's not taken out of schools. Well, which is it? Make no mistake, any of this talk about misinformation and disinformation, we know that Putin is involved in disinformation. We know it. The Russians always have. We know the Chinese are involved in misinformation and disinformation. What's happening coming from China is remarkable. And yet, is anybody really talking about that? Is anybody that has anything to do with anything, that has any kind of clout or credibility, are they actually talking about the things that matter? The answer is no. Why? Because everything has become about politics. When a country takes everything and makes everything about politics, it has no chance of survival unless the people unplug from the system. Unless the people say, I'm not playing that game. I'm sorry. You want me to stand up and just tolerate you telling me that all white people are inherently racist and there's nothing you can do about it. And you have to become anti-racist, which is not the same as Martin Luther King. Anti-racism means I have to be racist to stop racists. Not going to do it. I'm not going to stand there. I'm not going to have my kids learn it. And I'm not going to teach them at home that they're mistaken. No, they are lying and they are feeding poison to us. And that poison is not in the vaccine. That poison has nothing to do with the vaccine. The poison is why we are discussing the vaccine instead of taking it or not taking it. It's why we are making it into such a big deal, because the poison is politics.